Okay, I am guessing that this didn't get loaded up with the PowerPoint, yeah? If it didn't get loaded up, we're okay. We can solve that. Oh, we can't solve it. So my name is Brian Whitledge. Oh no. And I work in the Clark Historical Library to preserve some integrity for this poor computer. I'm going to disable the cord real quick. I specifically work with reference, but this week, thanks to those individuals that Marion mentioned being out of state, I'm filling in to answer some questions, particularly about the newspaper process that we do here at the Clark. I may not have visual support, which actually might not be such a bad thing, but we'll give it another shot. So the big thing here at the Clark, it was mentioned that we use Condor. We've worked on digitizing, but Condor isn't our only platform that we end up digitizing with now, thanks to a large grant from, yeah, we have no visuals. Thanks to a large grant, that's fine, that's life, from the National Digital Newspaper Project. So the National Digital Newspaper Project chooses one site per state. The Clark Historical Library is that site in the state of Michigan. Other states have their sites. I believe about between 35 and 45 states participate. And we have just wrapped up our first round of grants, which means that we've uploaded 100,000 pages worth of newspapers into the Library of Congress's freely available, worldwide, completely open platform called Chronicling America. Of those 100,000 that we've uploaded, the Library of Congress still has 30,000 to approve because they have some stringent metadata rules and they need to verify that before it goes into their system. Just one more quality control measure. So 72,000 pages are currently available on Chronicling America. What's nice about the National Digital Newspaper Project is it's a renewable grant. So we've recently renewed, and we will now be digitizing another 100,000 pages until 2016. And I believe that there's a third session of renewal after that. So maybe until 2018, we may be digitizing newspapers. I'm not going to get into the specifics of choosing newspapers or sites or anything like that, but there is a selection committee that's involved, and the idea is getting something representative. Chronicling America is doing what it's chronicling America. If we said, you know what, we want all 100,000 pages of Mount Pleasant, but we'd also like Clare and Midland and Big Rapids too. Well, the state of Michigan's a lot bigger than that. Something else was going on somewhere else. Let's get a sample. So we do a representative sample, and in a minute I will discuss some of that. The reason that I am up here instead of somebody else is that this week is the National Digital Newspaper Conference, National Digital Newspaper Project Program Conference in Washington, D.C. And so those who tend to handle this, the principal investigators, they are currently at the conference getting the lowdown on how to, and also I believe there's a lot of warnings of do it our way or your papers will not be loaded. I think that's probably the biggest part of it, although maybe I'm wrong. So I mentioned title selections. We'll be doing title selections. Any of you who have a strong interest in something can lobby it. It is a lobbyable thing. If people don't say that they don't want to see a paper in there, and then after papers get up, they say, well, nobody considered my community, speak up, send a note. Frank Bowles, the director here, Kim Haggerty in charge of microfilming, they will be working with the selection process, as well as other people from throughout the state. I know Library of Michigan has a representative, and I believe a couple other academic libraries have representatives. So that's the update on kind of one of our digitizing efforts through Library of Congress. Now we'll kind of focus on what Marion was talking about with Condor, but how to build up on it with what the Clark's newspaper projects do. So within Condor, we have quite a few newspapers, and I'll mention some numbers in a little bit. But we're working on different projects, and there's a wide variety of them. Some of these projects, such as the Clinton County News, require that we actually film paper copies, take that film and digitize it. If you haven't worked with newspaper digitization, the digitization is done by film. It's kind of cumbersome to photograph paper and then put that in a digital format. So a lot of places will have it filmed first and then run the film through specialized scanners. And those scanners, frame by frame, capture images and put that into usually 600 DPI TIFFs for output. So Clinton County would be something that would have to be filmed first, and luckily the film produces a digital image that can then be turned into a digital format. We would not host it though. This would be a contracted thing that we would make freely available in the Clark because we'd keep copies, and Clinton County would make it freely available on their own website. They prefer to host it. They don't want to host it with us. So we've worked out an arrangement where, and all this is fee for service. So we worked out an arrangement where we would do digitizing, let them host it. Grand Rapids Herald is something completely different where it's already filmed. We just need to digitize it. And the Grand Rapids Herald has their own website, or the Grand Rapids Public Library has their own website that they would prefer to work with. So we will allow the Grand Rapids Public Library to post what we digitize for them. So that's really just simple: digitize, get the metadata, give them the files and the metadata, and allow them to go forward with it. Grand Rapids Public Library has a really good infrastructure and a lot of public support, and they're wise to host their material in a place where their constituents can access it. Another paper being done is the Clio Messenger. Again, same idea, that has to be filmed and digitized. But because of cost constraints from Clio, they won't have any way of making it freely available anywhere on the web. And so they'll have an external hard drive, or they'll have an in-house server, and their researchers can use it on when they come in and visit, which kind of makes access limited. When we do that, we do work out an agreement where we can keep a copy here, because people do know that Clark Historical Library is a site for historical newspaper research. And that way we can say, well, we also have the Clio Messenger digitized, keyword searchable. Please take a look here. That way it's available in 2 locations throughout the state. And then the final one to mention that's upcoming is the Oakland County newspapers, which would be digitizing it and then hosting it on Condor. Just like Marion had mentioned earlier, we can do that, and what we'll do is work out a contract with them where they're giving us a fee for our service to host it through this software. One thing I wanted to mention was with newspapers, there are copyright concerns. So some of these, for instance, Clinton County is 1966 to 76. If it's published without notice, then we're fine. If it does have copyright notice, then we have an issue. Luckily, Clinton County Historical Association has a good relationship with the newspaper out of St. John's, so copyright's free and clear. And we do work with that a lot. Chronicling America actually stipulates that a lot too, with the making sure that everything's pre-23. They don't even want to get into, well, it's published in 44, but it's without notice. They say no, just 23 and earlier. Don't attempt to, or 22 and earlier. Don't attempt to play games. Because there's a lot of interest in digital newspapers, the Clark, through the help of an endowment through a few donors, has opted to create a mini grant that's available to local communities. And that mini grant, it could have been something that was just application, but it was decided among the people funding the endowment and Clark staff that the grant should be a little more fun. So we did it for the first time this past fall and spring, and it involved an online voting campaign in order to get the newspapers. 4 quality, what would you call them, finalists were chosen, and then communities could vote via an online campaign for whichever one of the finalists they preferred. They were Lansing, Grand Rapids, Sheboygan, and a fourth that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. The online campaign was successful, generated a lot of talk, also generated a lot of questions for us afterwards from people who didn't win the grant. Sheboygan did win it, and it's a seed grant. It's expected that the $1,000 to $2,000 that's involved will be added on by the winner, so that they can do more than just a few years. But it also brought in a lot of people coming to the Clark and saying, how can we, okay, we didn't win the grant, but how can we go forward with this? I think we can come up with some donors who might be interested in finding a way to come up with $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 to start a digitizing process. So it's actually better as a PR thing than even as getting stuff done. And it makes a lot of communities, a lot of local public libraries aware of how they can work with an academic institution in the state to improve what they're doing. There's quite a few challenges. Marion mentioned some of them that are Condor in general, and there's some that are library specific, but or newspaper specific. One of the big challenges is project management. I've mentioned a lot of projects. Somebody has to manage that, and that takes a lot going on, a lot of ins and outs. The projects are very diverse. Some involve filming, some involve just digitization, some involve creating an external hard drive with an in-house software or an in-house search mechanism. Some are through Condor, which is now a third-party vendor with OCLC. There's a lot of different stuff going on. And the big problem that happens is that there's a lot of staff turnover. We mentioned some of the staff higher up, but also in the microfilming unit, a lot of the staff is student staff and also student assistant staff and also part-time staff. The part-time staff luckily has always been highly, highly qualified, which means that they're highly, highly sought after by other people and they take other jobs. And so then it's a matter of training more microfilmers, training more people who have an MLS but are willing to put in work in a temporary position. That isn't guaranteed past the date of that grant. So staffing is always a challenge. Another challenge is the storage space. There is a working storage space. So what the files, where the working files are being manipulated, you need to make sure that you have plenty of memory and storage in order to manipulate the files. But then there's also saving the files later, which we're all probably familiar with. And then there's a matter of backing it up and saving it somewhere else for perpetuity. And that is some of the issues that are being run into currently with the Clark's microfilming or microfilm digitization effort, is that permanent storage, because the permanent storage is actually double whatever you're putting in for how we have our server set up. And so when we say that we have 5 terabytes of newspapers, IT is making sure that we're aware that we've just eaten up 10 terabytes of their space because they have redundancies. That became a big press earlier this year when the campus IT facilities, rather than creating any, well, no, they did something very good. They created a new off-site cold storage server, but it meant shutting everything down and starting everything up again over there, which was the people who have invested in this heavily by putting their labor in it seemed to sweat quite a bit when the power went down and then when it came back up. For me, Condor still worked. I was happy. And then we get to the last set of challenges, was our specifically deal with the content DM software, the OCLC product. What we noticed is that we crashed content DM a couple weeks ago. And we did that because of those buckets that Marion mentioned. Unlike a standard bucket that you buy at the hardware store that says how many gallons it holds, the content DM buckets don't say their limit on them. And so we just kept pumping papers into them. The CM Life newspaper, that's easy. The Ursula Hemingway scrapbook, that's easy. We're not getting near the max. But we just called every single newspaper local newspaper, and we put it into that bucket. And that way, if it's called local newspaper, it makes searchability easier for the users on the other end. They're not presented with 30 different collections that they can search. They just know, click on local newspapers and they're fine. Except it does have a maximum limit, and we shut it down. And when it shut down, newspapers were no longer accessible and nothing could be uploaded. So we're currently in a phase where we're not allowed to upload, and we're not allowed to change, and we're not allowed to do anything right now while they're fixing these buckets. And that means that we have to portion things out, cut them in parts, and start divvying up papers, which means that paper titles are now being considered collections. And later when I mention user experience, I'll talk about what that entails. That can be a little tricky, especially for a novice user of a digital website. And me, working specifically in reference and access, this is kind of what I really enjoy. We mentioned the So I mentioned the space limitations. There is also now a need to reorganize some other things with Condor to make it work. In order to make Condor most user-friendly for us, though, we'd like to customize it. And OCLC, being a large operation with a lot of people that they service, says we're not going to invest in making Content DM maroon and gold for you guys. I mean, do whatever you want, but we're going to give you some basics to work with. We can't invest the time in customizing it for you. So we have worked with our IT department here to create some very interesting customized features which use Content DM's built-in custom searching qualities and making it a persistent search, and then creating a landing page where the link is actually a link to that persistent search. Our campus systems, our library systems department has been very, very good at creating some very clever workarounds. And when we suggest, how about we do this? I want to try this. Those, as Marion mentioned, those unrealistic expectations of users. It should be unrealistic expectations of users and reference librarians. But when I say, hey, how about we try this? There are somebody who says, I might be able to do this. And then if you look at the link that they actually produce, it's 250 characters long, and you're just thinking, how did you come up with that search mechanism? But it does what it's supposed to. So that's how we've defeated one of those challenges, or at least attempted to hurdle it. And then we also have a cost issue. The Content DM charges a fixed rate per amount of space being used. At some point, we're continuing to put a lot of information in there. At some point, that fixed rate, each time we go up by X amount, the value goes up by X amount. It's not a nice tapering curve of, oh, you hit so much, we'll just give you the rest for free. It's like a Subway club card. We don't get that, unfortunately. They say you're paying for it. At some point, it might be beneficial to go hire somebody from somebody who knows how to do this as a programmer. And that's a cost benefit type of analysis. The National Digital Newspaper Program, that's actually one of the things that they talk about. Most people in the country are using Content DM OCLC software for their in-house digitizing. But what they're noticing is that when they hit so many films, maybe it's better to go with an in-house programmer and creating an in-house platform. And some of the bigger institutions, one of the ones that had responded was University of Oregon, I believe, had mentioned that that's what they were doing, was they went in-house. The Clark is not in the same position as the University of Oregon, but maybe if we continue uploading so much data, it might be worthwhile of thinking of that cost that's being given to OCLC maybe being turned around into in-house server space, in-house programmers, and a more customizable, more user-friendly feel that does exactly what we want. Then there's the user experience, and this is what I wanted to mention about some different things. So somebody had asked me at lunch, how do you guys keep track of all your newspapers and what you do? We have actually, we troll the web looking for Michigan newspapers that are hidden in the bowels of the internet. And when we find them, we get the links to it and we make them freely available. And the Clark has made a special web page on our newspaper microfilming site that lists every newspaper by county that we can find that is available for digitized. Now, some of these are corporate projects that are money-making endeavors. Some of them are subscription, ProQuest type of products. Others of them are freely available. Otsego County, for instance, Gaylord, they have made everything available through this nifty little easy website that's just PDF files that are indexed. And if you do your keyword search, it'll tell you, look at this copy. And then you go into the directory of newspapers and you pull it and you say, okay, it works. A researcher who's medium savvy can figure that one out. So currently, Chronicling America has 18 titles in it from 12 different locations. And they're Yale, Brockway Center, the Thumb region. I believe there's one from Cass City, Calumet in the UP, Grand Haven, I can't think of them all, but they're there. So there's 18 titles from 12 locations. In Condor, we make 15 titles from 5 other locations available. So we've got Isabella County, Clare County, Saline out of Washtenaw County, Sheboygan, and then a couple newspapers from Wexford County, Cadillac. So we make those available. And we list all of these. We maintain a Wikipedia page, which is called List of Online Newspaper Archives, which has, if a state does a good job, if they have somebody like us, it's very robust. State of New York has a really good one. Michigan has a really good one. Some other states, they don't list very well. They haven't had somebody go through and inventory it, so they might only list a couple titles. But that's on Wikipedia, and we make a link to all of those, tell people whether it's freely available, and we try to maintain that. Once a month we go through, make sure that the links work, do that type of thing. We've noticed with our user experience that that's been very popular. We can point people to it and say, look at these links, we give the years, we give that. We've also noticed that we've had some people come back and tell us that some of the searchability, because it's different platforms everywhere, they say, oh, well, you know, I really like using the one from Chronicling America, but I'm not very good at that Gaylord one. And we're not in a position to train everybody and create a how-to for each one, although that would be beneficial. People do make note of Condor. It doesn't use Boolean searching, which OCLC, you'd think it'd use Boolean searching, but it does not use Boolean searching. So that's really a difficult thing when somebody says, I searched in quotes and it couldn't find it. And you say, yeah, it looks for the actual quote mark, the word, a space, the word, a quote mark. And unless it's in the paper, it doesn't find it. So people have mentioned that. The load time on Content DM it can be slow. It is sending all the information from Ohio back up to Michigan for a researcher, or Oregon or Idaho or wherever the researcher's from. So some people do notice lag time. And there are some issues now with the fact that we have to break everything into all these multiple buckets, that if somebody gets into the guts of it, they will see that they are looking at, we have, what did I mention, 15 titles, and we're going to have a few more coming up soon. They're going to see 25 different collections for 25 titles, plus the CM Life, and that can be a daunting experience for somebody. And especially if they say, oh, I was after all the Isabella County papers, but I didn't realize that the Northwestern Tribune was an Isabella County paper. So I clicked off of that one, and that's where the information I wanted is. So we've noticed that some of our users have mentioned that as a poor experience. We do our best to accommodate that. And like I said, we have a really nice, helpful library systems department that's come up with clever workarounds, clever things so that you can click on Isabella County papers and it pulls up only Isabella County. And how they managed to get the search to do it, they've done it. They make it look just like Content DM, you know, pixel for pixel. You can't tell the difference. But if you're savvy and you read your URL at the top and you do some other stuff, you can tell that it's been done in-house, customized, so that we can have a better searching experience. Those are more or less the end of it. If it had that, it would say thank you. The information, if you ever have questions about the digitizing completely, or you have further questions about how the grant process with NEH and Library of Congress has worked, Kim Haggerty, who works for the Clark, would be your best contact, or Frank Bowles, and you can simply find that by going to the Clark webpage and looking for microfilming among the services offered. And I would give the number and whatnot, but 4420. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. Otherwise, it frees everybody, I think, 10 minutes. Oh, yes, please. So that's the big problem with that type of a data migration, is that Content DM uses, we've done things specifically to upload into Content DM as far as metadata templates and whatnot. We don't know how receptive Content DM is to making everything exportable in either an XML or some sort of output that we could then load into something else. What that something else is really a big question. Library of Congress makes their platform, which is wonderful, freely available. You do have to have a programmer who can spend quite a bit of their time working on it. This library is not in that position at this time. So making sure that that would work is the big question. Right now, the cost-benefit analysis says no, Content DM is the way to go. 3 years from now, if we continue to upload 720 gigabytes a year, maybe at 2.2 terabytes, we decide now it's not cost feasible, at which point then it's time to talk to some of these other institutions who've actually done that switch over and look at it. But I don't know all of the ins and outs about what the XML output is for what Content DM offers. I assume they make it so that's interoperable. At the same time, Library of Congress, what we know from working with Chronicling America, is not interoperable. They have their set standards and their set things, and if you try to take it out of there, you have to run it through some different conversions in order to make sure it will fit into any other interface. Yes, please.
I was just curious, what is the limit for that bucket?
I don't know the actual number, and I don't think anybody was really paying attention. Just stuff was going in, and all of a sudden it didn't work one day, and it's, why isn't it working? And Content DM didn't know they had a limit either. Just, but it's upwards of 2 terabytes. So it's not as if this was simple. This was, like I mentioned, 15 titles, 5 locations that had shut it down. So most people are going to be just fine with Content DM. We've just used that as our only host, and so that's what. Yes, please. Okay. So a company out of California called iArchives handles all of the metadata of the, I think there's 41 participants in the NDNP grant program. I think 39 of them use that vendor specifically to, if I'm remembering the stats from the report that had come out. They're the vendor. And so they handle all the metadata to create that format. I think some people could do it in-house if they felt like it, but this vendor, it's an interesting process that involves our uploading of the metadata in one format along with the digital files to somebody at Library of Congress. At the same time, everything goes off to iArchives and they handle it, and then it gets back to the Library of Congress with what they've done to it, so all 3 parts gets matched up. Library of Congress has some specific things that they want, and this company out of California is the go-to, it seems like. So, but I'm sure you could do it on your own.
I'll just say, I one of the advisors on the
Yeah.
committee, and one of the things that Michigan, that you are digitizing the paper. Most other programs, vendor of the digitizing as well.
Yeah.
Provide your microfilm a little bit of the metadata.
See, we all think that this is normal, so that's just how we do it. Of course you digitize it yourself. Are there any other questions? If you're ever having trouble with Condor, please feel free to let me know. I've done some pretty nifty searches where I've gotten it to find things that are otherwise lost. It's been kind of a game to puzzle it together, and I've enjoyed it. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. All of us here at the Clark are generally always around, except for the week of September 15th. That's it. So thank you for listening to me jibber jabber.